When I told you no such label exists, you said it was actually the media. So from a legal standpoint, no one has designated
you're mixing
you
it
that.
up. That's not the case at all.
Okay.
What it is that I was saying
Tell
was
me again.
that what it is that I'm saying is that the DOJ has labeled numerous Trump supporters that were there on January 6th, and some people that weren't even there on January 6th, as domestic terrorists. And you
labeled
can
them how and where.
And I'll tell you, you can look into the testimony of Stephen Friend, the FBI whistleblower who came forward and was talking about how it is that the FBI is designating these people as domestic terrorists and then handing these cases to FBI field offices all over the country.
David Pakman, as he normally does, got absolutely obliterated on his own show once again, this time by the QAnon shaman. Yes, the QAnon shaman went on David Pakman's own show and absolutely owned him on multiple different topics. Let's get into this clip here where woke David Pakman absolutely melts down as the QAnon shaman absolutely obliterates him on his own show, The David Pakman Show.
Carried out by, tell me which groups it was again?
Well, it's actually, if you look at it objectively, you look at the setup that was very clearly there from a very early stage prior to January 6th, what you're going to find is that largely the parties responsible would be people like Mitch McConnell, Nancy Pelosi, Yogananda Pittman, Mark Milley in the Pentagon, Christopher Wray in the FBI, and people in Antifa and BLM.
How do you know that any of that is true? What evidence do you have, for example, that Nancy Pelosi was involved in what happened that day?
Well, because if you look into the testimony of former Capitol Police Chief Sund, he had his emergency powers revoked by Nancy Pelosi and Mitch McConnell prior to the January 6th events, and they had to go. He had to go through them in order to deploy the National Guard. And when he gave the written request for National Guard to be present, they denied it because it would be bad optics and there was lack of evidence. But the evidence was all there. He was just not given the evidence by Yogananda Pittman, by the FBI, and by the Pentagon. And that's according to his own testimony. That's also according to the testimony of former Capitol Police Lieutenant Tarek Johnson.
Yeah,
if you enjoy content like this, then make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It really does help me out a ton. Let's get back to the video.
I've reviewed their testimony and was not able to find that. It's sort of beyond the scope of this interview to look at it line by line. I guess big picture, Jake, why do you think that parties that supported Joe Biden would try to interfere with Joe Biden being made president? Why would they do that? It seems counterproductive, doesn't it?
Well, the thing is what you have to understand is that it was about creating a setup so that a psyop may ensue and the weaponization of the Justice Department, the DOJ, could then be used to go after Trump and his supporters.
But that's just a word salad, Jake. It doesn't address the crux of the question, does it?
No, it does. It does.
How?
And just allow me to address it. So, because of the events of January 6th, there have been multitudes, thousands of Trump supporters that have been labeled domestic terrorists. And
because they showed up and committed crimes, though, right? Or you're saying they were tricked into doing so?
But with respect, David, that's not the same thing as committing acts of domestic terrorism in the way that there has been acts of domestic terrorism committed, say, for over 200 days all over the country during the 2020 riots by Antifa and BLM, who claimed in their own on their own websites that they wanted to overthrow the American capitalist
that's
system.
A non sequitur.
That's
I have to interrupt, Jake. I have to interrupt, Jake.
He has to interrupt because he knows he's getting cooked right now. And, you know, respect to the QAnon shaman here. I don't actually know his real name. I'm going to be honest with you. I have to call him the QAnon shaman. But respect to him, because a lot of people, including myself, with the smugness of David Pakman, you know, if I'm sitting down having a conversation with David Pakman, I keep trying to explain something to him and he just keeps cutting me off and also saying that's a non sequitur, that's word salad, all these things in the super smug way that David Pakman likes to speak when it comes to these debates. I wouldn't be able to keep my cool like this, but you know, the QAnon shaman is just sitting there. He's just explaining very plainly, very clearly exactly what happened and exactly what the motives behind what happened did happen. So respect to him for being able to actually destroy David Pakman like this.
Because what you have to understand is, imagine that I was accused of attempted murder. It is of no importance whatsoever if a year prior someone else somewhere else also tried to kill someone. I can't use that as my defense. And what you're saying is that part of the defense of what the people on January 6th did is your perception of what BLM did a year earlier. That's not a valid defense.
No. What I'm saying, dude, is this.
Okay.
What we're talking about here is optics. Okay. And they tried to make me in particular look as bad as humanly possible. They used all sorts of trigger words and trigger images to put a label on me and many other Trump supporters to circumvent our constitutional rights and to basically centralize power and use the levers of power in government to go after their political opponents.
Okay, let me ask you a real practical.
Very obvious. It's very obvious. And David Pakman is going to try to pivot. He's going to try to act like what the QAnon shaman is saying is ridiculous, but it's very true, and it's not even really up for debate. You know, whether or not you think that they were weaponizing the DOJ to go after Donald Trump and try to throw him in jail, that's regardless of even, like, let's just throw that out the window and just not even talk about that part. Let's just talk about the part where they labeled him as a threat to democracy and literally repeated that over and over and over and over again and cited the whole J6 stuff. What David Pakman and the QAnon shaman are arguing about here, they cited that event over and over and over again in an attempt to try and discredit Donald Trump and try to make him look evil and try to make him look like he's this dictator that's trying to overthrow democracy and take over the country and never leave the White House again. Even if we throw the whole weaponizing the DOJ stuff, which is probably the worst part of all of it, even if you throw that away, what the QAnon shaman is saying makes very much sense, a whole lot of sense. And David Pakman's going to act like it's not, and he's going to try to move past it really quick because he knows that he's getting cooked.
Practical question about that. You're talking about being designated domestic terrorists. I want to be super specific here because I really want to understand your view on this. These cases like yours were federal cases. There is no official designation of domestic terrorism by the U.S. federal government. So who labeled you as such and where?
The Mockingbird media did all over the news, number one. And number two, are you telling me that when, say, the government is designating institutions like, say, the Proud Boys or the Oath Keepers as domestic terrorist groups, or anybody for that matter that was flying into D.C.? I don't know if you're aware, but anybody that flew into D.C. in early January of 2021 is now being followed around by the U.S. Marshals on airplanes, and there are no U.S. Marshals on the FAA, on the airplanes all across the country because of this label.
You're doing a lot of whataboutism and changing topics.
This isn't whataboutism.
Let's just try. Hold on, Jake. Hold on. Let's conduct this interview in a sensible way. Okay. Let's stick with one of the things you said. When we finish with it, we'll go to the next thing. Okay. You said that many of the people charged for their alleged involvement on January 6th have been designated as domestic terrorists by the weaponized DOJ. I then said to you, there is no such designation by the U.S. government in the legal proceedings that you're talking about. So what do you mean they were designated domestic terrorists by the weaponized DOJ? You said, well, the Mockingbird media did it. So are you ready on... Hold on.
You talked about me.
Let me finish the question.
You said who labeled you that,
Fine.
And that's what I'm saying. Well, the Mockingbird media did.
You first said that the weaponized DOJ issued that label. When I told you no such label exists, you said it was actually the media. So from a legal standpoint, no one has designated
you're mixing
you
it up. That's not the case at all.
Okay.
What it is that I was saying what it is that I'm saying is that the DOJ has labeled numerous Trump supporters that were there on January 6th, and some people that weren't even there on January 6th, as domestic terrorists. And you
labeled
can
them how and where.
And I'll tell you, you can look into the testimony of Stephen Friend, the FBI whistleblower who came forward and was talking about how it is that the FBI is designating these people as domestic terrorists and then handing these cases to FBI field offices all over the country as instead of treating it like it was one incident on one day at one location. And in this way,
this is the research that the people on the left don't do. You know, this is exactly that. And also, we've seen the videos of people getting brought up, you know, in these hearings, in these FBI hearings, and, you know, saying that they're threats. I forget the actual language that they use, but like they're bringing up people who were there and showing videos of them. Like if you make videos on social media, I'm sure you guys have seen this. I don't even want to bring up their names because of how censored these people are, but they've brought them up. They've played their videos and said, watch out for these people because they're extremists, I think is the word that they used. They're extremists. And, it's people that were there. It's people that weren't there. It's very obvious, guys. We've seen this so many times. We've seen it in so many different ways, like the QAnon shaman is telling David Pakman, but also in the ways that I'm talking about, where we see the pictures of these people being shown in these hearings saying, this is an extremist, this is an extremist, that's an extremist, of people who were there and people who weren't there. But people, all of them, none of them were extremists, and they're all being labeled that way. So David Pakman's trying to act dumb, trying to act like what he's saying is ridiculous, but it's just the truth, and it's the blatant truth. It's not even up for debate. It's not even up for question. Let me know in the comments, though, what you guys think about David Pakman getting cooked on his own show once again, this time by the QAnon shaman. Sorry, I don't know his actual name, but I mean, the QAnon shaman's probably the best name you could really get. So let me know in the comments what you guys think about this whole David Pakman getting destroyed on his own show, this time by his based guest, the QAnon shaman.